that is nesting related. Since they do nest in tree hollows, they maybe thought that the corner or the edge looked enough like a hollow in a tree that they started like kind of kicking out the debris to make a nice little nest area. They did tend to do it as mated pairs, where one mate would watch while the other mate dug, and then they'd switch off and take turns. But there was still digging going on in the floor in other parts of the aviary. That was probably more foraging, soil eating, or just for fun. So mulch chewing, why might they be chewing the mulch? There is some literature that says that parrots eat bark, and they also chew bark and use pieces of bark to line their nests. So again, both foraging and nesting behaviors could explain this. And there's this theory that anything can substitute the fruits, seeds, and nuts that they would tear apart. So these birds were not getting entire fruits, and they weren't given nuts in their shells. So they, to get to do that chewing behavior, they were redirecting that onto the mulch. These are some hollows in trees, and it's interesting to look inside of them. It looks a lot like mulch, kind of like the bottom of the aviary. And this is another tree hollow that's full of some debris that maybe a parrot will want to kick out before having their eggs. And then also we know that they go onto the ground and do some foraging on the ground and eating of mud. I mapped their social network. Don't be intimidated by this. Each dot is an individual parrot, and they're color-coded the same way that the maps were. The lines connecting them are saying that they were seen in the same zone as each other, so they were in close proximity to each other. And the thicker the line is the more times that I saw them together. The solid lines mean that I saw them doing mating behavior, and the dashed lines were birds that were together but weren't doing mating behavior, so we can call them like friends. And when I added the enrichment tray, it did affect the social structure. You see Stormy's dot is blue and connected to his mate Chuck's dot. But once I added the enrichment tray, Stormy became much more connected, so he interacted with 5 additional birds, navigating the social behaviors around that tray, either sharing it or fighting over it. So there's some instances where we can use a resource like an enrichment tray to promote social behavior and to help parrots learn to bond, but we also want to be careful that they're not fighting over it and being stressed by that. So in conclusion, the Greys performed many behaviors on the ground, and the space use in the aviary followed a pattern that related to their social structure. Mated pairs were the main unit of the social structure, and they owned small territories. And the device did not provide enrichment for all the birds in the aviary, only a few benefited from it. So my recommendation is to provide enrichment items in all territories or to all of your birds to prevent distress and to increase their access to these toys. So, like you saw putting the bamboo in, only a few birds were enjoying it. And if you have multiple birds and just put one toy out, maybe only one bird will get to use it. So be thinking about exactly where you're placing these toys and who's really getting to use them. So Greys aren't the only ones who dig holes. At the sanctuary, some budgies were digging holes in their aviary, and these cockatoos are really famous because they dug up a meter-long hole, so almost a yard, in Australia in a golf course. So made their little tunnel. So how can you use my research in your home, which is a different environment than the aviary? People will put toys in a little container, like this little tray that's attached to a cage and is full of wood blocks. And that's really nice because parrots can reach in and choose their favorite toy and do that sorting and investigating and get to choose a toy, have plenty to chew on and play with. but that setup probably won't let them do their digging behavior. So I can tell you what I did. I bought this exact type of mulch. It's pine bark, and pine is a safe wood for parrots. I made sure it didn't have any colored dyes or any chemicals. And to be extra safe, you can heat it up in your oven. If some of you have probably heated up pine cones, it's the same. You can stick it in the oven for 20 minutes at 200 degrees Fahrenheit, very low setting, and then turn the oven off and let it sit with the door closed for 2 hours to fully dry the mulch. That'll reduce the likelihood of bacteria or fungus being in the mulch. You want it nice and dry to help it be clean. And just put it on a cookie sheet so it doesn't fall down. And please don't burn down your house doing this. And then you place the mulch into a container, and it can be a cardboard box. Cardboard boxes are really great. You can use a Tupperware container, whatever. This is a tub that I had that would work well in the picture. And my guideline to allow your parrot to really dig and stretch their legs out and do make a little hole for themselves would be to make sure that the container is about at least half of your bird's height deep and as long as your bird is tall. And then they should have room to stretch their legs while kicking up mulch. To keep your house clean, you may want to put a cloth under the container to catch any pieces that fall out for easy cleanup. And for health and safety, I'd recommend one of these toy boxes per bird that you have, so nobody's fighting over it, hopefully. And I'd recommend giving the toy box to your bird for about 30 minutes to half an hour for a set playtime, and then taking it away to make sure it doesn't accumulate poop, which would get kind of dirty and could cause some sicknesses for your bird. Avian vets really want me to emphasize that we want to keep everything nice and clean. So you can throw away any dirty mulch pieces and then replace them with fresh and dried, clean mulch. And so we tried it out at a parrot sanctuary. This is the Chesapeake, so a different parrot sanctuary, the Chesapeake Parrot Sanctuary, which houses cockatoos mainly. It's in Maryland, and they just put some mulch on the bottom of a play stand. These birds don't have aviaries and don't go outside, so everything has to be done inside the house. And turns out this cockatoo had a good time digging in the mulch. And it was very similar beak digging. If the tray were deeper, we would have seen more kicking and digging with the feet, probably. And this is another bird who has a habit of screaming a lot of the day and is nice and quiet right now. And also having a good time chewing some of the mulch. And I have heard that some zoos have problems with their zoo cockatoos digging holes. And I also heard a zoo recently had grays digging holes. So seems like a natural behavior that we can promote with enrichment, just to give them something new to do. So please ask me any questions and follow me online. I'm very active on social media and have a website. And I love to answer parrot enrichment questions. So there you go.
We were at Oasis down in the Tucson area in August, and we saw that digging in the grays and the cockatoo flights. A lot of it. I didn't see it in any of the macaw areas, just the grays and the cockatoo.
Yeah, so macaws, briefly it showed the clay lake in Peru, and there's this really well-studied cliff in Peru where multiple macaw species go to eat clay, and they hollow out little cavities in the clay, but it's a vertical surface. I don't really know of macaws digging, but I have seen budgies. I think some cockatiels have.
Oh, that's right.
Oh, there's some. Yeah. Okay, so some of the macaws sometimes do it. But it would be nice, there's a few people trying to do more research on how to do like a clay lick that's a little more than a cuttle bone. It's something vertical where your macaw can try to get into digging a vertical surface with their beak, but more research needs to be done on that.
You recommend the pine mulch, not the pine bark pieces, right?
It is pine bark mulch, so the mulch is made of bark. Yeah.
I've used pine bark nuggets too. Pine bark nuggets.
nuggets.
Got a thumbs up 2 out of 3 my parrots.
So you can combine.
Gave a
it.
thumbs up to pine bark
Sure,
nuggets.
Yeah. Yeah, the nuggets are what I used. And pick the size of nugget based on the size of your parrot. So if your parrot's large, you can do a large nugget. If it's medium, medium nugget. If it's small, can do small.
Yeah, good. We see a lot of young African greys, newly weaned or nearly weaned, that dig constantly in the corner of their cage. So it's not a nesting failure. It's not even necessarily a remnant of nesting or something that
because they're not.
They had, they didn't go through full weaning with their parents. They were spent maybe a month or so in the nest. So, but just so you know, we see that a lot.
That's fascinating. Yeah,
I have not seen it with any other, but I've seen, of course, I don't do varieties, but
yeah.
Greys do that a lot.
And I looked on YouTube when I was first doing this project, and I googled like greys digging, and there's a bunch of YouTube videos, and a lot of people call it chicken scratching. So if you Google grey chicken scratching, you'll see them doing this behavior on your sofa, in your cabinets, in their cages. And that's, it's really interesting to hear that even the young ones do it. So that is probably more of a foraging behavior. So hopefully providing them with this enrichment isn't necessarily going to cause them to have too many hormonal issues. Yeah.
I don't think it's hormonal.
Cool. Yeah.
And the younger ones, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot of foraging component to it.
Little cause I offer have a pair that's sort of kind of bonded. I mean, they're not mated, but they're bonded. They grow a little nest every day behind one of its cage. But if I come in there, they get really, really aggressive with me, which is normal. I know that. But when they're separate in the evening, I can separate cages, or one of them goes away first, I should say, while the other one's still out. There's no territory that you have. I can do whatever I want when they're doing that. They're both out. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, and that's similar to what we saw with the greys, where the mated pair would defend the territory together and be really intimidating. I did see some individuals, just non-mated birds, having individual territorial issues, but if they have, the pairs really do work together to defend those sites, so I'm sure it's much more pronounced. Yeah.
You should tell them about the one becoming famous and getting his own mate because of that.
Oh yeah, so the end of the story about George, who I talked about. So he did, and this was the question asked earlier, did he have a mate? He did not have a mate at the beginning of the study, but he did become more attractive to the other birds when he had the tray full of mulch in his zone, and they started looking at him. And one female bird named Chico came over and kind of started interacting with him, like the beginning of a courtship. And then, so after my study, I came and followed up, and George had become much more social, and I heard that a bush had grown in his zone, and this little bush had made him very attractive. And, so he actually had a mate, and they were living behind the bush together. Yeah, so it's also really great to have these visual barriers at least, so they can have their own personal space, because these ones, they really do like going behind the bushes and having, sometimes I couldn't see them because they were like in some ferns that were growing, and those are really desirable areas. So it's nice to allow your bird to have the option of having some privacy too.
But that's not necessarily breeding activity, that's just social, to some extent.
There's both. So if you, I mean, usually I would see mated pairs going into one area, but it can also be individuals because some of the more, like the shyer birds who didn't want to be close to me would just kind of go in their own area to be out of sight. And I think it's good for all birds, even ones that are singly housed, to have their own like kind of out of sight area that they can go to. And you can just like put up a little barrier with cardboard on the cage or have a hidey hut. So they've got that space in case they want to have some alone time. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.